The board further fixed individual responsibility for the collision among the officers on USS Evans. It found that Lieutenant J.G. Reynolds was the conning officer from the time of the signal to take station astern of Melbourne to the time Lieutenant J.G. Burton automatically assumed the con by ordering right full rudder. As such, Lieutenant J.G. Reynolds was responsible for the orders which placed Evans on a collision course with Melbourne. His later order of a left turn was sufficient to relieve, but not to eliminate, the hazard in which he placed both ships. The board found that Lieutenant J.G. Reynolds did not exercise due care, which contributed to the collision by
right 10 degrees rudder.
Right 10 degrees rudder, right.
Failing to ascertain correctly Evans' position relative to Melbourne before turning, and by failing to keep track of Melbourne's movements relative to Evans after the maneuver began. This would have revealed to him that he was on a collision course. By failing to request information from the Combat Information Center.
Left 5 degrees rudder.
And by failing to make a more decisive turn to the left, which would have eliminated all hazard to both ships. In the case of Lieutenant J.G. Burton, the board found that as officer of the deck, he was personally responsible for the conning actions taken by Lieutenant J.G. Reynolds, and found Lieutenant J.G. Burton equally responsible for conning Evans into a collision course with Melbourne, as well as the subsequent left turn.
Left eyeball or in. Right full rudder.
By ordering right full rudder, Lieutenant J.G. Burton assumed sole responsibility for conning Evans. The board pointed out that Lieutenant J.G. Burton, as officer of the deck, was the officer on watch in charge of the ship and primarily responsible for the safe navigation of the ship. The basic responsibility for the collision flows from the manner in which Lieutenant J.G. Burton discharged his duties as OOD. According to the Watch Officer's Guide, the OOD, when another officer has the con, should assist in the maneuvers by checking the performance of the bridge watch, keeping a watchful eye on the entire maneuver in order to inform the conning officer of anything which might escape his notice and consequently might endanger the ship. This two-intellect system serves as a check to prevent accidents arising from confusion, lapse of memory, or oversight on the part of the person conning.
Bravo 4, roger out. Right.
The board found that Lieutenant J.G. Burton failed to ensure that the conning officer knew the formation's base course and Melbourne's course before turning, and that he failed to determine correctly Evans' position relative to Melbourne prior to the turn. That he failed to request information from the Combat Information Center. That he failed to keep track of Melbourne's movements relative to Evans, which would have revealed that he was on a collision course. That he failed to call the commanding officer of Evans, as was required. That Burton failed to make a more decisive turn to the left, which would have eliminated all hazard to both ships. And that he failed to decode Melbourne's Corpin signal correctly.
Unshackle. Break. Time 0312. Over.
The board found that Commander Mitchell adequately discharged all his responsibilities as commanding officer of Evans. However, the board also recognized that a commanding officer has inherent accountability for his ship and absolute responsibility for her actions. On September 3rd, 1969, Commander 7th Fleet awarded Lieutenant J.G. Reynolds a letter of reprimand as punishment under Article 15, Uniform Code of Military Justice. On September 11th, 1969, before a general court-martial convened by Commander 7th Fleet at Subic Bay, Lieutenant J.G. Burton entered a guilty plea to charges of dereliction of duty and of negligently hazarding a vessel. He was sentenced to be reprimanded and to lose 1,000 numbers of the unrestricted line. On September 16, 1969, Commander Mitchell, who had entered a plea of not guilty, was found by a general court-martial to be guilty of dereliction of duty and negligently hazarding a vessel. He was sentenced to be reprimanded. If anything is to be learned from a tragedy such as the Melbourne-Evans collision, it is not enough to simply recount all the things that were done wrong or neglected. We should review and emphasize the correct way to prepare adequately for assuming a deck watch, and the proper way to conduct the watch once you have uttered those words, "I relieve you, sir." The relieving watch should be on station in sufficient time to become familiar with equipment conditions and the overall situation and still relieve on time. A trip to CIC is essential in order to get the full tactical picture, a fix on the position of other ships in the area, any planned maneuvers of the formation, and also to get a feel for the tempo of operations.
Our course is 220 at 18 knots. We have one contact, 310, 10,000 yards. CPA of 030 at 4,000 yards. Time of CPA is 23:55, designated Skunk Gulf.
When the relieving officers reach the bridge, a review of the tactical situation is repeated. This process reinforces the picture in the minds of the OOD and the JOOD who are relieving the watch and helps them absorb the rapid flow of many facts and items of information. It also double-checks the accuracy of information, ensuring the pictures in combat and on the bridge conform. Prior to assuming the watch, all messages received since the last period of watch standing should be read and understood. The captain's night orders should also be read carefully and initialed when fully understood. Through briefings from their counterparts, the relieving OOD and JOOD should be made fully aware of everything concerning the status of their ship and the tactical situation.
Two boilers on the line, number 1 and number 4. Number 1 and number 2 ship service generators with a split plant.
Information passed from one watch to the next should include the following: the condition of readiness and materiel condition set, the status of lookouts, which boilers are in use, anticipated speed changes, reserve speed available and maximum speed requirements, navigational equipment such as LORAN, radar, or fathometer in use, important events scheduled during the watch, the course and speed of the ship, and its position in the formation. Finally, both the OOD and the oncoming JOOD should check personally the position of the guide to be certain their ship is on station before they relieve the watch.
Bridge combat. Combat recommends course 048, 22 knots to station.
The close cooperation between the deck watch and CIC should always be continued throughout the watch period. The OOD, as the officer on watch in charge of the ship, must remain constantly alert. He must demand the same performance from other members of his watch team and stand ready to assist them.
Coming around too slow, put on full rudder.
Increase your rudder to right full.
Whenever a situation arises, which, according to the night orders or standing orders, requires a call to the captain, the OOD should make the call immediately. If an OOD is in doubt about whether a situation requires calling the captain, that doubt alone is a signal to him to make the call.
Officer of the deck, we have a signal in the air from the OTC.
When you have completed all procedures for assuming the watch and are prepared to follow strictly the proper practices of watch standing, then, and only then, are you ready to say,
I relieve you, sir.
and assume the responsibilities that go with those words. This film contains a factual recreation of the Melbourne-Evans collision. The names of the principal officers on the Evans were changed.